strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength. Street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge. Quick service announcement brought to you in part by Warriors.
Damn, that shit was dope.
And welcome back to another Warrior Creed live stream with me, the radical Majid Nawaz. And today's topic is a very serious one. As you can see on your screens about now, it's called LA Riots, Musk, Peter Thiel, JD Vance, the vice president, and Palantir, a failed palace coup against Trump. It's been a very, very eventful week. A lot has happened, and so bear with us as we go through this all with you. And of course, we appreciate your patience while you are waiting for this stream to begin. But of course, as we always try and do, crossing the T's and dotting the I's to make sure that we have a presentation for you that sufficiently, without overcomplicating matters, describes what just happened over the course of the last week in US domestic politics and what's still ongoing in the state of California with regards to the LA riots. All of this in top line summary for you all is a repeat of what Elon Musk tried to do against the UK equivalent of MAGA and Trump, and that is Nigel Farage and Brexit, by offering the carrot of funding and then turning publicly against Farage when Farage refused to support Musk's divide and conquer support for Tommy Robinson, stage name Tommy Robinson, the well-known anti-Muslim paid Likudnik Zionist agitator. Musk tried that in the UK, a coup against Farage by publicly supporting Rupert Lowe, the now ex-member of Parliament for Reform. He now sits as an independent member of Parliament. After Musk tried that in the UK, it was only a matter of time before he tried the same thing with Trump in the US, though, of course, they had been biding their time for an opportune moment to do similar against Trump and thereby tarnish his reputation. And that's why today's stream is called LA Riots, Musk, Thiel, JD Vance, and Palantir, a failed palace coup against Trump. We're going to demonstrate, for those of you who bear with us till the end of this stream, what JD Vance, the vice president, a bit like Pence in Trump's first term, how Vance has been made the front man for a PayPal mafia led by Palantir, which is AI military targeting technology and all-seeing eye database company called Palantir, founder of Palantir, Peter Thiel, and led also by his PayPal co-founder, Elon Musk, the world's richest published billionaire. Those two, along with allies, have been involved in an attempted coup against President Trump for the purposes of undermining his administration, undermining his ability to continue governing in peace. And of course, the coup has multiple tangible benefits for the PayPal mafia. If President Trump couldn't be ousted in the form of what Elon Musk recently explicitly supported, and that's via impeachment, if that couldn't happen, then the idea would be, as it was with Nigel Farage, to goad President Trump into another Jan 6 scenario. In the case of Farage in the UK, it was the national riots here, the national riots that were agitated against Muslims and immigrants, that Muslims were blamed for, and eventually it turned out it was not a Muslim that murdered those children in Southport. But by that time, a mosque had been ransacked, 2 asylum centers, hotels being used as temporary housing facilities for asylum seekers had been torched with families inside them. That particular incident was an attempt to tarnish Nigel Farage's name. Now, similar with the LA riots in California, again, with the same Joker-type character, Elon Musk, lurking in the background behind this incident, there is an attempt to undermine President Trump. If an impeachment scenario isn't possible, which clearly by now it isn't, because as the headline of this stream demonstrates, the coup attempt failed, then the second aim would be to goad Trump in the way that the attempt was to goad Farage into supporting Tommy Robinson here in the UK. The second aim would be to goad President Trump into an overreaction against the disturbances that have been agitated against him for the purposes of facilitating an over-militarization of the Trump administration, ending in a dictatorship and a tyranny, which would also suit the Palantir PayPal mafia agenda. The rest, that sounds like a lot. The rest of this stream is going to be dedicated to unpacking all of that. And we hope, as you by now recognize, with detailed receipts. Warrior Creed live stream and Radical Media do not come to you except without detailed receipts. And so those of you who stay with us to the end of this stream will understand a great deal better precisely how this particular week has been a PayPal mafia stroke Palantir, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, with their frontman, JD Vance, the vice president, attempted coup. In other words, a globalist attempted coup against President Trump. And we'll explain to you the reasons for why this has been attempted as well. Let's begin with this. And that is President Trump's explanation in the Times today, explaining why he needed to send troops in to LA. And as you can see there, the Times on your screens, it says, Los Angeles would be burning to the ground right now if federal troops had not been sent in, President Trump said. Writing on his Truth Social platform, the president compared the unrest in that once beautiful and great city to the destruction wrought by the Los Angeles wildfires earlier this year, saying 25,000 houses burned to the ground in LA due to an incompetent governor and mayor. Trump criticized Gavin Newsom, who's the state governor, and Karen Bass, the mayor, for, quote, bungled permitting system that he claimed meant people were unable to rebuild their homes. Now, what's important here to understand is that the riots, and those we're going to come to who have been backing those riots in California, can achieve two aims. One is to destabilize the presidency of Donald Trump, and the second is to goad President Trump into an overreaction. Now, the idea would have been, with their globalist governor in place, Gavin Newsom, that he would engage with these rioters in a standoffish manner, because they would be mostly peaceful riots. Meanwhile, the images of burned cities would be plastered all across the media, portraying Trump in an extremely negative light. That bumps President Trump into sending external National Guard troops to stabilize the situation, because Gavin Newsom is deliberately not seeking to stabilize the situation, calculating that the political cost for these riots will fall on Trump's head, not least because they are sparked over what is genuinely a legitimate concern among the people, the citizens of the United States of America, and that is that due process must be followed when attempting to deport people from the country. Of course, media has been replete with stories about people either being snatched off the streets or deported without due process accidentally and then having to be repatriated. So the globalist governor, Gavin Newsom, and let's not forget, that's the same governor, Gavin Newsom, the state governor, who during COVID was among the strictest in enforcing the globalist mandates while being caught out himself dining out in a restaurant. So strict were his ridiculous mask mandates that he insisted that those who were eating in restaurants maintain the mask on their faces and only lift it to take individual bites of their food and then put it back down over their mouths, even whilst at dinner in a restaurant at the table. And yet himself, Gavin Newsom, was photographed in a restaurant not even wearing a mask. That same globalist state governor, Gavin Newsom, is now deliberately standing back, or was deliberately standing back from the rioting in an attempt, in his own political calculation, to allow for the fingers with his allies in the media to be pointed squarely at President Trump. That left Trump in between a rock and a hard place. Either do not send in national troops, and in which case State Governor Newsom continues to allow the riots to spread again over a legitimate concern, and that is that due process must be enforced and followed in any deportation. So, of course, it was going to end up being the blame was going to end up being landed at Trump's feet. So Trump took the political calculation to stabilize the situation, knowing that this would have worked against his interests. So he sent in the National Guard. But of course, that can also be used against him, because to goad him into an overreaction allows or enables the charge to be placed at Trump's feet that he's turning America into a dictatorship, which is, by the way, precisely what his globalist enemies want, to turn America into a dictatorship. If they can destabilize Trump's presidency sufficiently, then it doesn't matter that President Trump believes in a democratic federal republic, because he would be forced to send in Marines and state troops just to merely to stabilize the situation, especially if globalists are able to destabilize it through riots in the way they have been in California, and in the way that in the United Kingdom they did so through the national anti-Muslim and anti-immigrant riots that took place a few months ago. So Trump was caught between a rock and a hard place and had to move. And he took the calculation that sending in the National Guard was better than standing off and allowing Gavin Newsom to permit those rioters to escalate and continue to escalate in LA. And this explains the next headline that you see on your screen. Sorry, the next extract, again, from the Times. All of these receipts will be published in the Radical Dispatch tomorrow via Radical Media. But here you can see from the Times, just to read it for you, President Trump called for the arrest of the California governor and said that, quote, a civil war would happen if you left it to people like him. Now, keep in mind, that's the point. President Trump understands that these globalists with their agents in power, such as Governor Newsom, want a civil war. That's why they have been for so long agitating for a civil war across Europe by positing Europe's Muslim population against its non-Muslim populations. That formula may work in Europe and in the UK, and it did work because we had our own national riots, but it doesn't work in the United States because there aren't that many Muslims in the United States, whereas there are large ethnic minority groups. So the formula in the US is to use race and immigration. The formula in Europe is to use immigration and Islam. But in both instances, it's to encourage a civil war. President Trump understands this. Let's continue reading from the Times. President Trump called for the arrest of the California governor and said that a civil war would happen if you left it to people like him. The standoff between Gavin Newsom and the president escalated after the Democratic governor filed legal proceedings against Trump over the decision to deploy troops in LA. The head of immigration enforcement, or ICE, previously warned that city and state officials could face arrest if they were to obstruct federal agents' work. This is a perfect recipe for a civil war scenario. Trump understood that. To stabilize it very quickly, he sent in the National Guard. The alternative was not to do so. What would have happened is those mostly peaceful riots would have spread. They've already spread. We're going to get to that in a minute. And you would have seen California completely burned down. And of course, President Trump would have taken the blame again, because the spark for the riots is a legitimate grievance, and that is that due process must be followed in deportations. Such a grievance even pulls at our own heartstrings here at Radical Media, despite the fact we can completely see through the globalist plan to spark a civil war. But of course, when you're trying to spark a civil war, it always works best when you use legitimate grievances. We've always been saying that from the days of our counter-extremism work. Those of you who, thank you, by the way, who've been following us since our Quilliam days and our counter-terrorism and counter-extremism work will know that we've said this. Islamists were very good at using and exploiting legitimate grievances, such as the invasion of Iraq, the illegal invasion of Iraq, to incite their jihadist insurrection around the world, what we then called a global jihadist insurgency. Those of you who've been following since those days will remember precisely that phrase from us, a global jihadist insurgency. Today, what we're facing is an attempted global palace coup. Same aim, same agenda, and that is to divide populations for the purposes of an authoritarian state to come in and fill the void where the civil war or the division in the populations has left that void. And so that's what's going on. President Trump understands that's what's going on, and he made the calculation to send in the National Guard rather than stand back and allow Governor Newsom to continue to facilitate the racial tension and division in California by standing back with a light touch and not doing anything to control those riots. We're going to continue providing you receipts for precisely why this analysis is the most plausible and likely scenario to have unfolded. To continue, there you have a post by Representative Anna Paulina Luna, who, keep in mind, is not only the GOP head of the Oversight Committee in Congress, but is also a former U.S. Air Force veteran. And what Anna Paulina Luna has said is, who is behind all these crazy riots in LA? Looks like we found the answer. Let's have a look at the video that Representative Paulina Luna put out, and it seems to confirm what we've been saying to you over the course of this stream.
Just found a really great deep dive here from the Data Republican on X. So who is behind all these crazy riots in LA and that will be across the nation? Just like, remember, in the Summer of Love with BLM, remember who's organizing all that stuff. With this specifically is being funded by an individual by the name of Neville Singham, who actually made his money by pushing communist Chinese propaganda, became a billionaire doing it. He's now funding, and the guy behind all of these protests was also behind and tied to the protests at Columbia University, pushing all of that BS, if you don't remember. And then also, too, if you actually look at the social organization that's putting out these flyers, it's the Party for Socialism and Liberation, which is, and I kid you not, the actual Communist Party. So they're using Hispanics, they're using illegal immigrants, they're trying to hype people up thinking that they care, but they don't care. They would stop illegal immigration. Obama deported people. Why all of a sudden now? It's political.
It's political. And here is a post by Anna Paulina Luna explicitly stating that Los Angeles is experiencing a hostile takeover, and instead of doing anything about it, they're just blaming Trump. It's a political setup. Now, many of you will remember episode 1780 with Joe Rogan, when we appeared on that episode explaining exactly this during the COVID mandate period after I was cancelled from LBC for challenging every single COVID mandate. And we forecasted back then in January 2022 that globalists would use civil unrest and riots and divisions between races and religions in order to create the problem so that a solution would be demanded. Remember, problem, reaction, solution. That's how they operate. They cause the problem, then there's a reaction to that problem, and the reaction often is people demanding more state power to control the problem, such as riots. And of course, the solution that comes in is ever increasing state authoritarianism and power that encroaches on our civil liberties. And as a reminder, we're going to play you a section from that 2022 interview that we did, episode 1780 with Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
Now, that excerpt there is just as a reminder that the globalists have long sought to penetrate governments, penetrate cabinets, as Klaus Schwab explicitly stated there, for the purposes of subverting governments to their own agenda and for their own faction. Now, not only is it, of course, the California state governor, Gavin Newsom, but in addition, Elon Musk, who until recently was very close with MAGA, serving in the Trump administration, now, of course, having been exposed and outed, has been completely expelled. But these are all attempts to penetrate the cabinets. Now, in the case of these LA riots, as you heard Representative Anna Paulina Luna state, there's a chap called Neville Singham who's been directly behind funding some of the agitators in those riots. The source that she used is on your screens now from Data Republican, small r. That's at Data Republican on Twitter. They say, let's break this down. Neville Singham is deeply tied to PSL, the group behind last weekend's anti-ICE protests. He was also the force behind last year's pro-Palestine campus unrest. Senate Republicans urged the Biden admin to investigate him for FARA violations. Nothing happened. He's operating on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP. If all of this is true, and there's a lot of evidence it is, then we are actively ignoring CCP influence on US soil. Why are we doing this to ourselves? Enough is enough. Now we're going to play you a video purported to be by Anonymous, or a faction at least of Anonymous, going through some of this evidence as to people or factions or nefarious interests who are behind funding these riots in LA for the purposes of destabilizing President Trump's administration.
Who's funding the LA ICE riots? Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna gave a name. Neville Singham is the man funding these riots. Not a fringe conspiracy, a billion-dollar fact. Neville Roy Singham, former tech CEO, sold his company ThoughtWorks for nearly $800 million, then disappeared into Shanghai, where he now operates inside a Chinese communist propaganda ecosystem. He's not donating to charity. He's building a political influence machine. Tens of millions funneled through shell nonprofits like the People's Support Foundation into radical activist groups like the Party for Socialism and Liberation, the Answer Coalition, Code Pink, and Breakthrough News, groups tied to anti-ICE actions in LA. PSL was on the ground. They weren't random protesters. They had funding, they had infrastructure, and they had a message that mirrored Singham's pro-CCP, anti-American ideology. Meanwhile, Shirla, the respectable face of immigration advocacy, got over $34 million in taxpayer funding and worked closely with protest organizers. They're not violent, but they laid the foundation. This isn't just outrage. It's foreign influence agitation, funded by a billionaire ideologue with open ties to communist China. They're not just marching, they're maneuvering. And now we know who's bankrolling the moves. My friends, we are all anonymous, and we just pulled back the mask.
There's the American dream and the California dream. There's no Alabama dream. Eat your heart out, Texas, Tennessee, and Florida. This is California.
Now, again, it's important to note here that despite the fact that there's a lot of evidence that these riots are being funded and supported from interests abroad to destabilize the US under the presidency of Trump, and despite the fact that we have on record globalists such as Klaus Schwab saying that they penetrate the cabinets of the West for the purposes of influence, and therefore the globalist governor of California, Gavin Newsom, serving as an example for such penetration of the cabinets. And in addition, Elon Musk serving as an example for the penetration of the Trump administration. Despite all of that, it's important to recognize something, and that is that these riots, though having that support and having their agents and various assets in place penetrating the cabinets, still, nevertheless, may have been sparked off the back also of legitimate grievances. In fact, subversion always works best when it utilizes and exploits existing legitimate grievances. And so, again, we emphasize that it becomes incredibly important for the purposes of pulling the rug from under these subversive attempts to undermine the Trump administration, that the basic core grievances are not overlooked. And the core demand for due process and care when engaging in deportations, and for the lack of politicization of deportations, is important to pay attention to. Because, of course, only such a violation of such legitimate concerns and grievances could be used to spark such riots, because even with the funding, even with the foreign efforts, even with the subversive agents in place penetrating the cabinets, if there are no grievances to exploit, it becomes almost impossible to move the people in the direction you want them. So it's important also to understand that, so that going forward, legitimate grievances are addressed. But this is the context in which Trump has said that it could have been a civil war if he didn't send in the National Guard. And you can see here from our CP video, President Trump comment on Los Angeles riots: "Thank goodness we sent out some wonderful National Guard. They've really helped. A lot of problems they were having out there. They were afraid to do anything, and we sent out the troops, and they've done a fantastic job." That's the context that you must see Trump sending in the National Guard. And here's a video of him saying precisely this.
Days in the last week, I would say, mostly good. Some of the things you're reading about in Los Angeles, thank goodness we sent out some wonderful National Guard. They've really helped in a lot of problems they were having out there. They were afraid to do anything, and we sent out the troops, and they've done a fantastic job. So I want to thank them very much. I also want to thank you for being here as we discuss one of the most exciting parts of the One Big Beautiful Bill. It is indeed a big, beautiful bill, and it's doing very well.
Now, that explains Trump having to send in the troops. He was caught between a rock and a hard place, had to move because Newsom would have allowed for those riots, mostly peaceful riots, to continue undermining the stability of his presidency. So he sends in troops, attempts to calm this situation down. But meanwhile, of course, he's dealing with problems in his own administration. And that is that at the same moment, that's why we say it's been a busy week, Elon Musk decides to launch his own direct coup attempt against President Trump. And of course, the most infamous of interventions made by Musk in an attempt to undermine Trump has been this one on your screens now, accusing President Trump of being in the Epstein files. And there it is on your screen now. Elon Musk says, time to drop the really big bomb. Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. That is the real reason they've not been made public. Have a nice day, DJT, or Donald John J. Trump. Mark this post for the future. The truth will come out. Musk then, unsatisfied with only that post, went further and directly endorsed President Trump be impeached. Keep in mind, of course, this is while Trump's facing an onslaught from the left because of the LA situation, because of the deportations, causing destabilization on the left. Trump comes in to bring in the destabilization from the right, a classic palace coup scenario. And here is Trump endorsing the impeachment, Musk endorsing the impeachment of Trump using one of his simps, Elon Miles Chung, famous for being an Elon Musk surrogate on his own platform. Chung posts, President versus Elon, who wins? My money is on Elon. Trump should be impeached and JD Vance should replace him. And you see above there, Musk saying yes, directly endorsing the attempt to impeach Trump and replace Trump with the vice president. That's why we said at the beginning of this stream that we're going to demonstrate for you how the LA riots are connected with the globalist agenda to destabilize Trump, with JD Vance as the front man and Elon Musk backing an attempted destabilization of Trump at the same time. This all happened in the same week, and its aim is to undermine the Trump presidency. The Times of London picked up on this and reported it. Elon Musk says Donald Trump should be impeached as it happened. These were live updates as it happened in the Times, with a subheading. The Tesla owner says JD Vance should replace the president after suggesting Trump was mentioned in the Epstein files and claiming his tariffs would cause a recession. Of course, our immediate reaction as this unfolded over the course of the week was to demonstrate that Elon Musk is attempting to make old news, and that is Trump's known past affiliation with Epstein, into something more than it was by attempting to regenerate it and make it into a new news scandal, precisely how he did with the grooming gang scandals in the UK that were known and that had been historic news, attempting to revive them for the purposes of inspiring riots in the UK, which is precisely what happened in the end anyway. So that is Musk's game, attempting to revive old news. And in the case of Trump being in the Epstein files, that is indeed old news. And we commented on it immediately with the following words. Netanyahu lackey Elon Musk is throwing a tantrum because he was booted out of the inner circle and MAGA now hate him. We did try and warn you all about this man-child. Trump was on Epstein's jet, but didn't visit the island. This has been public information for a long time. We published that in the Radical Dispatch on the 11th of Jan, 2024. And you can see the rest of the quote there, but just so we can show you this. This is the quote at the bottom of the page there. President Trump, this is from the Radical Dispatch, 11th of Jan, 2024. President Trump has gone against Netanyahu over Israel. This exonerates him from suspected influence by Mossad-owned compromat in the Epstein case. Trump also seems to have known about this entire Epstein operation eventually being exposed from as far back as 2015. A logical conclusion with regards to Trump, then, is that he was the man on the inside who eventually bring the house of cards down. Now, what we've said there, that Trump knew about this from as far back as 2015, is demonstrated with the following video. This is Trump in 2015 saying Bill Clinton's going to have a lot of problems coming up with regards to Epstein. So if Trump's been speaking about this from as far back as 2015, way longer than Elon Musk has been aware of the Epstein situation and how it was used for compromat to blackmail politicians, then perhaps our analysis that Trump was the man on the inside is the one that holds. Have a look at this video. This is from 2015.
Bill Clinton.
Nice guy. Got a lot of problems coming up, in my opinion, with the famous island with Jeffrey Epstein. A lot of problems.
Now, that's Trump speaking about Bill Clinton in 2015, having a lot of problems coming up with the famous island of Jeffrey Epstein. It doesn't look like the kind of guy that thinks there's something on him, because he wouldn't be the one on such a public stage as a presidential candidate. He wouldn't clearly be the one raising it if he had something to fear for himself. And it is very interesting that, yes, through our own reporting on the Epstein files for a very long time, as we said, that particular video we published back in 2024 with the Radical Dispatch, the quote that we just read you for, in our own research for this, we've understood how to corroborate those who have merely known Epstein versus those who visited the island. And what we've stated here in this list for everybody, again, we published in the Radical Dispatch way prior. We will republish this tomorrow for everybody. But as you can see there on your screens, we wrote, the best way to assess the names mentioned by all witnesses is to match them with other corroborating evidence. Such corroborating evidence would include, but not be restricted to, matching, number one, names mentioned by trial witnesses, and we've got a hyperlink there where it's searchable in a database. Number two, names in Epstein's Little Black Book, which is also searchable in a database, or his older Black Book from 1997, which we also hyperlinked to a searchable database. Number three, the flight paths and flight logs, which were also searchable and hyperlinked in our Radical Dispatch, kept by Epstein's private jet, nicknamed the Lolita Express. Number four, names mentioned in Epstein's private calendar. Number five, evidence of having been on Epstein's island. And number six, evidence of having visited any of Epstein's homes. And last week's Radical Dispatch determined the entire Epstein operation was evidently a global CIA/Mossad honey trap used for blackmail. Our final corroboration would therefore be to clarify, this is the final one, which of the names betray behavior beholden to Netanyahu's foreign policy objectives by publicly advocating for war, the commission of war crimes, or any other crimes against humanity. The last corroboration is particularly important considering ongoing war crimes in and ethnic cleansing of Gaza. Now, with that list of corroborating points in mind, it's very clear, we can tell you this at least, that having investigated this for many years, Trump doesn't match that list. He was on the jet, but he was not on the island. And the witnesses who mentioned Trump, some of them in court, such as this court document that's been released in front of you, one of the witnesses was asked explicitly, what about Donald Trump? You can see there in the bottom, and highlighted in blue, his name, Donald Trump. And the answer was no. And again, did you ever massage Donald Trump? The answer was no. So Elon Musk's cheap attempt to destabilize the Trump administration from within by using Trump's name, the same Trump who in 2015 said that Bill Clinton, who was on the island, who was on the jets, Bill Clinton, who has had multiple corroborating pieces of evidence stacked up against him, that the argument that somehow the man who exposed Bill Clinton as being complicit in the Epstein compromat ring would himself have something on him requires a bit more evidence than a tweet from Elon Musk. Because if a tweet was sufficient, then of course we too could say that Elon Musk is compromised by Epstein. Because there it is, a photograph of Musk with Ghislaine Maxwell, with us asking Elon Musk in our own tweet. What's going on here? And of course, Musk will tell you that he was photobombed by Ghislaine Maxwell, thereby demonstrating that it isn't sufficient simply to say that somebody who knew Epstein is guilty. Rather, you must corroborate the evidence. Merely, for example, being in the black book isn't proof alone that somebody had become compromised by Epstein. And likewise, we understand that by simply picking on individual strands of evidence, one could even accuse Ian Miles Chung, the one who suggested that Trump be impeached and Vance take his place, to which Elon Musk agreed. Just as a reminder, there is the post with Musk agreeing to Ian Miles Chung saying that Trump should be impeached and JD Vance should replace him. Well, again, if we're just going to pick up strings of evidence, then of course, here are some social media posts by Ian Miles Chung, Elon Musk's simp surrogate online, where he appears to be suggesting that he's attracted to underage children. Of course, we have posted that to him, and like Musk, we're yet to receive an explanation. And so again, it's very important to corroborate all of this rather than simply jumping to conclusions. Now, if you look at our corroborating list, which we posted many times in the Radical Dispatch, and we will post again tomorrow, this list of corroborating evidence that's required, all of these databases we posted there, some of them are searchable. We'll repost that tomorrow. Somebody that does fit that criteria is the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer's appointed ambassador to Washington, D.C. Lord Peter Mandelson, for example, is in the Black Book, did visit Epstein's mansions in New York after Epstein's conviction, did go to Paris with Epstein after his conviction, and is photographed on the island with Epstein. And he's our current British ambassador to Washington, D.C., appointed by our globalist Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. That's the kind of corroborating evidence you need to be able to determine guilt. Otherwise, simply from a photograph, one could also claim that Elon Musk is guilty for sleeping with underage children on Epstein's island. But of course, nobody would say that off the back of one photograph, would they, Elon Musk? And so likewise, it is important that that Musk understand that posting things like this require more evidence than he presented. And of course, Musk knows that now as well, because Musk has had to delete all of those tweets. And so this was our response. Again, reading it for you from the Radical Dispatch, which we wrote in 2024, 11th of Jan 2024. Look at the second half of this screen. President Donald Trump has gone against Netanyahu over Israel. This exonerates him from suspected influence by Mossad-owned Compromat in the Epstein case. Trump also seems to have known about this entire Epstein operation eventually being exposed from as far back as 2015. A logical conclusion with regards to Trump, then, is that he was the man on the inside who would eventually bring the House of Cards down. Now, having heard everything we've just said, that hopefully that statement there we wrote in the Radical Dispatch from 2024 makes a bit more sense. And of course, we showed you that video of Trump saying that Bill Clinton had a lot to watch out for when it came to Epstein. And so, of course, what was going on there with Trump throwing those allegations, with Musk throwing those allegations at Trump? Again, it was an attempt to undermine Trump's presidency, as he attempted to do with Nigel Farage in the UK prior to Farage even becoming prime minister, for the purposes of JD Vance becoming president in the US. That is Peter Thiel's man. So the PayPal mafia. PayPal was founded by Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, among others. They're known as the PayPal mafia. But Peter Thiel, Elon Musk's friend since the PayPal days, has been the largest single contributor to any political candidate ever in US history. And that contribution is the contribution that Peter Thiel gave to make JD Vance a senator and then allow him to become vice president. JD Vance is the technocrats' man on the inside. When they speak of penetrating the cabinets, they did that with Vice President Pence. They did it with Elon Musk. They've got Governor Newsom in California, and they've got JD Vance as vice president. That's the penetration of the cabinets that Klaus Schwab was speaking of. And even the Times of London has picked up on this now with this article: Trump v. Elon Musk may deliver one true winner, JD Vance. Subheading: as Republican big beasts rip each other apart, the canny vice president is keeping his head down. It's a golden opportunity for the alchemist of MAGA. That's by Katie Balls in the Times. Of course, JD Vance is not the alchemist of MAGA. Ignore that part. But the point being that even corporatist press are now speaking of how JD Vance gains from the instability in the US, both externally and against the left with regards to California and the riots, and internally with regards to Musk's outbursts against his former friend and still current president. Vance, of course, is Peter Thiel's guy. The idea would be the technocrats would have somebody on the inside, currently vice president. If Trump is impeached, he becomes president. But if Trump isn't impeached, he's goaded into enforcing stronger and stricter and ever encroaching authoritarianism in order to control the destabilized situations with regards to the riots and so on and so forth. Either way, they get their way, the technocrats, because what they ultimately want is authoritarianism. That's what Palantir wants. It wants total technocratic corporatist control over the state. The same thing, as we said, was attempted against Farage. We published all the receipts in this radical dispatch from March the 12th, 2025. Reform leader Nigel Farage suspends Rupert Lowe after failed coup as police investigation is launched against Rupert Lowe. And from that dispatch, we showed you the following, reading for you from the screens. Now to the role of Elon Musk, who is also beholden to Netanyahu's Likudnik Zionists. Musk sought to dangle the carrot of millions in funding to Reform, that's Nigel Farage's party, Reform UK, on condition that Farage admit stage name Tommy Robinson into the party. Tommy Robinson is a well-known British-based anti-Muslim divide and conquer agitator paid by Likudnik Zionists. All those receipts have been published in previous radical dispatches, confirming everything we've just said about stage name Tommy Robinson. We will republish everything for you all tomorrow. So continue reading from this previous radical dispatch. Remember, that's from this one dated March the 12th, talking of how Musk attempted a coup previously against Farage in the UK. Now, continue reading, second paragraph down. Farage promptly told Musk that he's not for sale. The Times reports 6th of January 2025, Nigel Farage will sacrifice Elon Musk's donation to keep out Tommy Robinson. At least this coup attempt against Trump appears to have failed for the meanwhile, though, of course, the reaction in California is still ongoing. It's important that President Trump doesn't overreact and only give the globalists what they want, which is an authoritarian technocratic state, in order to control the rioting, falling for their problem reaction solution plan. But at least so far, Trump has appears to have understood exactly what Musk is about. As this Times article demonstrates from the headline there, you can see it's dated the 8th of June, Sunday. Trump warns Elon Musk of consequences if he turns to Democrats. Subheading, the president says his relationship with the tycoon is over after their epic social media feud. I'm going to read a section from that article for you. The Times reports 8th of June, 2025. President Trump has declared his relationship with Elon Musk over, despite the tech mogul withdrawing some of his most incendiary allegations in an apparent attempt to mend relations. Musk, the world's richest person, deleted a post on X alleging that Trump was implicated in the Jeffrey Epstein files, documents concerning the notorious New York pedophile. He also removed the post suggesting Trump should be impeached and replaced by JD Vance, the vice president, one of his most seditious comments from his online tirade last week. However, Trump ruled out any reconciliation. Down to the bottom in the bold, Trump also warned there would be serious consequences if Musk, who donated more than $250 million to Trump's election campaign, started giving money to the Democrats. Serious consequences indeed. So Trump appears to have understood what's going on with Musk and is warning of serious consequences. But this, by now, should be clear, was a JD Vance operation serving as frontman to the PayPal mafia, which is Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, whose latest project is Palantir, seeking to gain control over all data across on a federal level across the United States of all citizens. And the reason that's important to understand that it's the PayPal mafia that were behind this for the purposes of achieving the singularity through Palantir, and that is the AI supremacy through Palantir. The reason it's important to understand is that just before all of this kicked off with regards to Trump, there was a warning sign and a warning shot delivered on no other than the Joe Rogan show. And some of you may have caught this. And that was what appears to have been a completely unrelated incident, but is very related, as we're going to explain now. And that was Joe Rogan's personal ATM pin being revealed online in a stunt by somebody who clearly had inside information working as an asset for globalists. And we have the video for you. But first of all, this is Colin Rugg saying, Joe Rogan clearly uncomfortable after mentalist Oz Perlman successfully guesses his ATM pin code on his recent show. We're going to show you the video of Perlman doing that to Rogan and then explain to you how it ties into what we're speaking of here with regards to the aborted palace coup against Trump and what it has to do with Palantir. But just have a look at this first and tell us if you're not creeped out by this guy.
How long have you been married?
16 years.
Okay, nailed that question. Well played.
Thank you.
Your sister's happy, your wife's happy. If I asked you, would your wife know your social security number?
No.
She doesn't know it.
No.
So is there any way in the world I could know your social security number?
I don't think so.
Right, you say I'm a stalker, who knows?
Yeah, you couldn't get the information.
Maybe.
Online.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I'm skeptical, you're skeptical.
Well, especially someone famous.
Yeah, fully. Plus you can't change that, so I'm not going to do that to you.
Data dumps. Yeah.
If I told you right now to make up a random number, I'd say, get out your calculator. I'd love that. And you add it up and you do a random number. You know, screw calculator. I want it to be spontaneous. Would your wife know your ATM PIN code? No?
No.
Lie to me. Do not tell me your real ATM PIN code.
Okay.
Obviously, unless you want to. Make up a fake 4-digit number off the top of your head, what feels to you utterly spontaneous.
Okay.
When I say go, 1, 2, 3, 4-digit code, random, go.
Okay.
Say it.
2020.
2020, okay. So you ask me, how do I do what I do? I'm going to write down 2020.
Okay.
It's weird, but statistically, men will lie bigger, women smaller. Men like to lie by saying things are bigger, right? No shocker.
Okay.
So I don't think I would tell you right off the jump for me that means that your first number, you don't have to say anything yet, I wrote 2020, is smaller. That's what most people do when they're rushed. If I had given you 5 minutes, you would have done this different.
No, I wouldn't have.
No, you would have.
Why would I have?
Because you would have thought about it, and then people go down a different path.
Nope.
No?
Nope.
Okay, worked out for me either way. You'll be honest if I'm right.
Okay.
I got a hit, which means it's a 0 or 1. I think the first number of your code's a 1, isn't it? Your real PIN code.
My ATM
PIN code.
Why would I tell you that on the air?
Should I only show this to you?
Sure.
Only show it to you?
Yeah.
Can we acquiesce that the first number I got was correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you did repetition. So I like the fact when people always say to me it's fake when they watch the videos, they're like, you must have set up. Joe doesn't even want this to happen right now. He had no idea this was going to happen. You used 2 numbers in repeats. What that means is you probably did the same thing. You also didn't use any of the same numbers. So I know there's not a 2, a 0, or a 2 in it. I don't think so either. Mm-hmm. And I'm watching you while I say it. You put the hand up. You might as well have said yes to me out loud. So now I know. Think of the second number,
Okay.
third number, fourth number.
Got it.
Every time you did it, it's a data point.
Okay.
I'm only going to ask you one more question. I'm not looking for answers. The last number is the biggest, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm showing this to you. Is there a camera behind me? I don't want to make sure. I'm only going to show it to you. It's not 2020. How'd I do, Joe? Is that your ATM PIN code?
Yeah. That's weird. I'm skeptical because I've got that PIN code in the mail. You know?
He's calling his bank right now and be like, Joe, do you know this? Has this guy been playing the long game?
Yeah, I don't like that.
Now, we're going to explain to you exactly what that video has to do with everything we're saying. Keep in mind, remember what we're speaking about today. It's important to keep, thank you for your patience. There's a lot to get through. It's important to keep in mind what we're speaking about, and that is LA riots, Musk, Theil, JD Vance, and Palantir, a failed palace coup against Trump. Our analysis holds that the disturbances in America at the moment, in California with the LA riots, with Elon Musk betraying President Trump, that all of this is part of the ongoing globalist agenda to undermine our nation states for the purposes of destabilizing them so that they can replace them with technocracies. And one of the key instruments of a technocracy will be a company known as Palantir. Palantir being founded by former PayPal mafia founder Peter Thiel, who's Elon Musk's former founder in PayPal, who is now, after having founded Palantir, funded J.D. Vance's political campaign and became the largest single donor in America's history for any single political candidate. So that's Palantir, that's Peter Thiel, and that's Elon Musk. What is this video that we just shown you of Elon Musk's personal private ATM PIN number being revealed on his own show, him being caught off guard, as you can clearly see there? What does that have to do with all of this? Well, the explanation as to what that has to do with all of this is it's possible to arrive at it once you disqualify all and everything that is absolutely impossible. Of course, it's impossible rationally that guy that we just showed you there was reading Joe Rogan's mind. It's also impossible that he has some special skills that he can pluck numbers from the air out of all the random combinations possible and just luckily guess Joe Rogan's PIN code live on air. No, what's more probable than those two impossibilities is the following, which is on your screens now. Joe Rogan, warning. We posted this on the very day that clip was released. Warning. This is not a mere trick. It is a demonstration. You are right to immediately suspect that something is wrong. Elon Musk's PayPal co-founder, Peter Thiel of Palantir, hilariously named after the all-seeing Palantiri stones wielded by the evil Saruman, who betrayed the White Council in Lord of the Rings, has just agreed a see everything unified software agreement, the all-seeing eye, with the Trump administration. Right? So that first half there, by the way, here are the receipts for that. As you can see, breaking on your screens now. TradePal, breaking. According to the New York Times, the Trump administration is using Palantir's Foundry to collect and centralize Americans' data from federal agencies, potentially enhancing surveillance and creating detailed profiles from government data. So now back to our explanation as to what we think just went on there on the Rogan episode with his personal PIN being released. Look to now the middle of this paragraph. This appears to be a demonstration to your audience of how much data they can access. If our view holds, this is not a trick. It is a show of power. The magician is showing their hand. The man speaking to you here on air, cockily flirting with releasing your personal data online, is not your friend. Frankly, he is a piece of shit. To continue reading, this is a J.D. Vance operation, not a real Donald Trump operation. Peter Thiel is Vance's main political benefactor, not Trump's. It remains to be seen whether Palantir, brackets Skynet from the Terminator movies, will survive the dangers of its own existence. But only an idiot would think that Thiel and Palantir are friends of humanity. They will be stopped. Now, keep in mind that we posted that before, 9 hours before, Musk turned on Trump and endorsed J.D. Vance as the replacement for Trump. We wrote there explicitly, this is a J.D. Vance operation. You can go 1, 2, third paragraph down. This is a J.D. Vance operation, not a Donald Trump operation. It was a demonstration of power by Palantir, who clearly hacked Joe Rogan's personal PIN, revealed it to him online in an attempt to intimidate him in a show of power. The magician revealed their hand. Intimidate him against what? Intimidate him from supporting the criticisms of Netanyahu's war in Gaza and not supporting Netanyahu sufficiently. And by criticizing his recent episode where he criticized Douglas Murray in his performance against the comic Dave Smith. All of that clearly upset some people, and they needed to send a warning to Rogan that they were able to have access to his personal information as a warning that he better back down from his criticisms. This was a warning sent by none other than Palantir in a J.D. Vance operation. Now, we published that 9 hours prior to Elon Musk doing what he did by betraying President Trump. It's also the only possible explanation for how a man such as that chap there on Rogan's show is attempting to convince the rest of us that he can read minds or randomly, luckily guess out of the combinations, all the combinations possible, randomly, luckily guess Joe Rogan's pin on air in the way he did. Don't take us for fools. Now, of course, this link to the PayPal mafia and Palantir being behind the destabilization attempts against Trump for the purposes of an ever-expanding authoritarian state is also the concern of others. Business Insider recently reported this. The PayPal mafia includes tech titans like Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, and Reid Hoffman. Here's where its members are now. And we're going to read an extract from that article for you in Business Insider, which is on your screens now, dated 7th of December, 2024. Thiel, now a billionaire with a net worth of $15.9 billion, according to Bloomberg, co-founded the big data analysis firm Palantir in 2003. He was also the first major outside investor in Facebook and contributed early funding to Yelp and LinkedIn. Now, go down to the second section in bold there. Thiel was also responsible for, we're reading from there now from the screen, secretly funding Hulk Hogan's lawsuit against Gawker Media, which resulted in the company shutting down Gawker and selling the company's assets. Now to the third section in bold. Thiel gave a record-breaking $15 million to Vance's campaign, the largest donation ever given to a single Senate candidate. And now down to the last piece of the line in bold, right at the bottom of the screen. Thiel served as an FBI informant. Hold on a minute. So, you got a FBI informant who happens to be a billionaire, who happens to have been the first investor in Facebook. And we know how Facebook treated President Trump during the 2020 elections, who happens to have founded a company he named called Palantir, that he named after the all-seeing stones that the dark wizard Saruman uses in Lord of the Rings to see everything. In other words, the all-seeing eye of surveillance. And that guy funds the vice president, J.D. Vance. And you want us to believe that he's on Trump's side and not on the side of the technocratic globalists, considering he's literally one of the main founders of technocratic globalists. They're hiding in plain sight, as Elon Musk was hiding in plain sight. And people are beginning to realize that. By the way, this is the PayPal mafia, as Armstrong Economics, a blog, reports. Here they all are from 2014. There's Peter Thiel right at the front. This is the PayPal mafia. It's a group of guys who are literally globalist technocrats hiding in plain sight, funding people to penetrate the cabinets of the Trump administration, such as Musk, such as J.D. Vance, in order to destabilize the Trump administration. Armstrong Economics continues. We're going to read from that blog now, 9th of June, 2025. Some may have heard of the tech geniuses who compose the PayPal mafia. The mainstream media glamorizes them as tech visionaries, a band of rebellious geniuses who disrupted finance and went on to build empires. Yet, beneath the surface of the so-called PayPal mafia is not innovation for the public good, but the construction of a new form of oligarchy, one more dangerous than the robber barons of the 19th century. Why? Because this new class of elites doesn't merely build companies. These men influence monetary systems, shape global narratives, and fund policy engineering through unelected channels. PayPal became a clever workaround to bypass the traditional banking system, cloaked under the premise of convenience. This so-called mafia includes Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Reid Hoffman, Max Levchin, David Sachs, Scott Bannister, Roloff Botha, Steve Chen, Chad Hurley, Jawed Karim, Premal Shah, Yu Pan, and Yishan Wong, among others who had roots in PayPal. Each went on to build their own tech empire, spanning across biotech, social media, space, venture capitalism, and surveillance. To continue reading from that article, Armstrong Economics reports 9th of June 2025, the Internal Revenue Service, Social Security Administration, and the Department of Education have already begun working with Palantir engineers to develop the most extensive federal database in U.S. history. Social Security numbers, medical claims, tax filings, bank information, immigration records, education records, debt, every piece of information that various agencies have collected on American citizens will be transferred to the coming centralized database owned by Palantir. Now you can begin to understand why we're saying that the problem is a lot deeper than Elon Musk's drug-addicted erraticism. There is an agenda at play here that seeks to destabilize the presidency of Trump, either for the purposes of replacing them directly with their own guy, J.D. Vance, who's already in place as vice president, having penetrated the cabinets, or indeed force Trump's hand to send in more and more troops so that the US becomes a military dictatorship. So the technocrats get what they want anyway, which is technocracy run by AI in a dictatorship, because they would have forced Trump's hand. President Trump, clearly aware of this, is doing what he can to avoid the trap. But it's important that you, the public, are also aware of the trap. On your screens now, we're going to continue reading from the Armstrong Economics blog, 9th of June 2025. The big, beautiful bill. So, by the way, this is the bill that Trump is seeking to pass right now, and that Musk claimed was the reason for him being so upset with Trump. The big, beautiful bill has several provisions related to AI, most notably a 10-year moratorium period during which state and local governments will be prohibited from regulating AI. The bill awards the Department of Commerce $500 million to secure federal IT systems using AI. The Department of Defense, Customs and Border Protection, and the Department of Health and Human Services will also receive a direct funding to promote the use of AI technology. Prohibiting state, this is the part in bold, pay attention, prohibiting state regulations ensures that all technology is guarded and controlled by the federal government. There is resistance from both parties, as those who understand technology know the power this would provide the federal government. There are theories that the Elon versus Trump clash is based on this provision. So what's really going on is an attempt by Palantir to secure this all-seeing eye database. They've already, as we've demonstrated, they've already managed to get the Trump administration on board with this, as is on your screens again now. According to the New York Times, the Trump administration is using Palantir's Foundry to collect and centralize American data. But of course, once that data is collected and centralized, they need control over it. And the big, beautiful bill by Trump is where the dispute lies, because Musk objects to certain parts in that bill. And one of the things he's mentioned is he wants to dismantle the size of the government. Now, keep something in mind. If you're technocratic corporatists who are seeking to take over using AI to create a technocracy that automates governance and removes humans from the decision, then you need to destroy the existing government in order to do so. That's the Great Reset. You need to destroy so you can build back better. But you can only build back better if you destroyed the old. And they tried to do it through COVID. So Musk and his critique of big government isn't driven by, say, for example, a small L liberals or a small R Republicans critique of big government, and that is government inefficiency and waste. Of course, that is the thin end of the wedge for technocrats. They seek to ride that wave of concern around government inefficiency and waste for the purposes of destroying the old, and that is the existing government structures, not so they can return power to the people, but rather so that they can usurp power for technocracy. And all of that becomes clear when you understand exactly what those who support Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and the PayPal mafia, what that cabal believes in, which we're going to go into now and demonstrate that they do not believe in shrinking government in order to return power to the people. They believe in shrinking government in order so that they can usurp the place of government and take that power for themselves and run the world by corporation. Again, we're going to come to receipts demonstrating all of this for you. So that's how it links to the big, bold, and beautiful bill. And now, again, on your screens, you should see a second headline from a second blog on Armstrong Economics, Dark Enlightenment, the true reason behind the Musk versus Trump clash. And again, we're just going to read some key sections from that for you. All of these receipts will be published in tomorrow's Radical Dispatch. Again, Armstrong Economics reports 9th of June. The feud between Elon Musk and Donald Trump is directly related to the AI provision in the Big, Beautiful Bill. Looking back at Peter Thiel and JD Vance, Vance has no political experience before Thiel funded his ascension into the Senate after funding his entry into venture capitalism. Both Thiel and Musk urged Trump to select Vance as his VP candidate, and many believe this was to propel the so-called PayPal mafia into politics. The three men are also strongly associated with Curtis Yarvin, the mastermind behind the Dark MAGA or Dark Enlightenment. Now, that's a name for the rest of this stream we're going to ask you to keep in mind, because we've just made a statement that the PayPal mafia, the Palantir tech bros, the technocrats who wish to bring about a global technocratic corporatist state for globalism, that cabal, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, the names we read out earlier, those guys do not wish to shrink government because they believe in returning power to the people. They wish to shrink government so that they can take that power for their own corporatism, running the people using AI in the name of efficiency. So they are using your sentiment, your desire, our desire to shrink government, not to return power back to us, but to take it for themselves. And we're going to demonstrate that by focusing on this one name, Curtis Yarvin of the Dark Enlightenment. Who is Curtis Yarvin? We're going to continue reading. Second half of this paragraph in bold there. Curtis Yarvin. Keep in mind, by the way, this is why Elon Musk was wearing a dark MAGA hat, because they believe in something called the Dark Enlightenment, the founder of which is this chap called Curtis Yarvin, who we're going to read about right now. Second half of this paragraph in bold there. Curtis Yarvin, a former programmer turned blogger, has long argued that American democracy is irreparable and should be replaced by a corporate-run monarchy led by big tech. Yarvin sees democracy not as civilization's peak, but as its degeneration, a system that obscures real power, which he claims is held by a cathedral of media, academia, and bureaucracies that spread progressive ideologies. Yarvin calls his views the Dark Enlightenment, or the Neo-Reaction, and firmly believes that the ideal government would resemble a feudal state or a tech corporation with centralized power. They are the principles of the Dark Enlightenment, the founder of which is Curtis Yarvin, and that's why Elon Musk was wearing a dark MAGA hat, because he's a proponent of the Dark Enlightenment. He believes in small government, not because he believes in decentralization, but because he believes in small government, because he wants to replace large government with corporatism, centralized technocratic corporatism, not decentralized democracy. So we stand at a crossroads in our desire to Doge, or Department of Government Efficiency, in our desire to shrink government. Do we allow those who are riding that desire of ours to pretend that they are on our side, when meanwhile they are using this sentiment simply to shrink government so they can take that power for themselves and their corporatism to create a technocratic tyranny? They don't believe in decentralization. To continue reading for you from the Armstrong Economics blog. He, meaning Curtis Yarvin, who we're just speaking about, has met with numerous members of the Trump administration, including JD Vance. Yarvin has said he is coaching Peter Thiel, according to Time magazine, and he even called him a friend in an interview with the Hoover Institution. Before he entered the White House, Vance spoke favorably of Curtis Yarvin. There's this guy, Curtis Yarvin, who has written about some of these things, Vance said on a podcast in 2021, adding, I think Trump is going to run again in 2024, and I think I know what Trump should do. If I was giving him one piece of advice, fire every single mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state, replace them with our people. Musk is now calling for Trump to be impeached for a third time. Are the tech elite hoping to install Vance to head the position of POTUS? Time will tell the true plan, but this elaborate feud between Trump and Musk is too sudden not to raise suspicions. Now, the key point there, keep in mind, is Curtis Yarvin seems to have all of them, Thiel, Musk, Vance, all of them he seems to have access to. And what do they believe in? They believe in firing every single mid-level bureaucrat, every single civil servant, which would seem to ring true with our sentiment of wanting a smaller government. But remember, their agenda is not wanting a smaller government in order to decentralize power and return it to the people. Their agenda is wanting a smaller government so that they can step into that void with their technocratic corporatism and fill the space that large government used to occupy with their AI-driven technocracy, and the one ring to rule them all will be their company Palantir, the all-seeing surveillance state. That's what's going on. And now the Times of London is also becoming aware of this problem. Reported in the Times on the 8th of June, 2025, the main trigger for the falling out is the president's one big, beautiful bill of large tax cuts for the rich and increased investment in border security and the military, offset by some spending cuts. It passed the House by a single vote and is now before the Senate, but under fire from Musk. He called it a disgusting abomination that would drive up the vast government deficit that the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, his waste-slashing drive, has been trying to tame. He has promised in next year's midterm elections to fire all the politicians who betrayed the American people by supporting Trump's bill. To continue reading from there are nerves in the base about how this plays out. Republican politicians worry about the messaging and the money. Musk has deep pockets and a long memory. People thought Boris Johnson versus Dom Cummings was bad, one former UK government aide said. Now imagine if Cummings was the richest man in the world. Now, interestingly, though Musk's opposition to this bill is what he cited as his main reason for rebelling against Trump, what we are demonstrating is that their real reason is that they get to undermine Trump's presidency. They get to destabilize it with the LA riots. They get to goad him into an overreaction in California in order to continue creating a security-heavy state that encroaches upon the civil liberties of the population. And they also get to bump him into supporting in his policy agenda, supporting Palantir and the use of Palantir tech for the purposes of stopping those rioters by surveilling American citizens. This is the direction Trump is being bumped into. And it is no coincidence that in the Times of London article we just read to you, the analogy is drawn by a UK government aide to Dominic Cummings falling out with his former globalist Prime Minister Boris Johnson during the COVID years. Dominic Cummings was COVID mandate era Prime Minister Boris Johnson's former de facto chief of staff. And he broke ranks with Dominic Cummings in a very similar manner to what Musk has just done to Trump. Now, that analogy is apt here because it's important to remember who Dominic Cummings was. And again, we've already published all of this in the Radical Dispatch. We're going to republish these receipts for you tomorrow. And this, from a former Radical Dispatch, explains why Dominic Cummings is relevant here on your screens now, because Sky News recently attempted to rehabilitate Dominic Cummings, and we reacted to that with the following words. Boris Johnson's de facto chief of staff, Dominic Cummings, was a cheerleader for lock me down harder, daddy COVID mandates, and is a sycophant for tech billionaires like Bill Gates and their pseudo-intellectual influencer leaders, such as Curtis Yarvin of the Dark Enlightenment. Even here in the UK, when COVID-era Prime Minister Boris Johnson's former de facto chief of staff rebelled against him, he was criticizing Boris Johnson's government, and he's criticizing the size of the state in Britain. But again, for the same reasons. Dominic Cummings' view is that the state in Britain is too large, but what he wants to replace it with is more technocracy, not return power in a decentralized manner to the people. The same thing is playing out here in the United Kingdom. We're going to continue reading to demonstrate this. So again, from our reaction to Sky News attempting to rehabilitate Dominic Cummings. Now, notice that we've said there that Dominic Cummings is a fan of Curtis Yarvin. We're going to continue reading. Second paragraph. Cummings tried and failed to set up a party to rival Nigel Farage after he tried and failed to appropriate Brexit from him using Boris Johnson. Similarly, Elon Musk is now suggesting setting up a party to rival Trump. The same play, the same format. We're going to continue reading. Third paragraph. Now, again, he's trying to weasel his way into Farage's Brexit support base. Cummings is a Michael Gove acolyte, a globalist who, yes, critiques the old world order status quo, but only to burn it all down so that it can be replaced with a new world order, Great Reset, and a fully integrated globalist technocracy. He is responsible for crimes against humanity while serving as a COVID mandate era chief of staff under PM Johnson, not least involving the deaths of thousands of elderly using midazolam in care homes. Ironically, Johnson wasn't strict enough for Dominic Cummings on COVID mandates, despite Cummings being the one who broke his own lockdown rules to, quote, test his eyesight, for which he got caught. He's not an authority on anything except perhaps how he enabled Boris Johnson's tyranny. Now, way back in the Radical Dispatch, we mentioned Cummings' plan. There you see it on your screens. May 15th, 2024, technocratic Dominic Cummings proposed new political party to thwart the return of Nigel Farage. And in that Radical Dispatch, we mentioned again Cummings' affinity for Curtis Yarvin of the Dark Enlightenment. You can see here from your screens. More telling is who Cummings proposes as intellects. Recall that Andrew Sabisky, this is one of the people that Cummings asked to join the Boris Johnson administration, was dismissed from his government post following complaints about his previously expressed views on race, intelligence, and eugenics. Will O'Shea, a data specialist appointed through Cummings' scheme, was dismissed in July 2020 after calling for police to shoot Black Lives Matter protesters with live ammunition. Lately, Cummings has been encouraging the US Republican Party to nominate an alternative to Trump as their candidate for the 2024 US presidential election. The reason given is what I find interesting. Trump was unable to control government. On his Substack, Cummings has cited Curtis Yarvin, among others, as people I found interesting in US politics. But who is Curtis Yarvin? Curtis Yarvin, on his own Substack page called Grey Mirror, argues that American democracy is a failed experiment which should be replaced by monarchy or corporate governance. He is known for developing the anti-egalitarian and anti-democratic ideas behind the Dark Enlightenment. In other words, Cummings seems to be attacking the PM because he wishes to usher in an efficient, read authoritarian technocracy, not because he opposes the madness surrounding COVID mandates and the unquantifiable damage they have inflicted on the country and people. So again, keep in mind, the aim of those who follow Curtis Yarvin and the Dark Enlightenment. Who are they? Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, the PayPal Mafia, J.D. Vance, all, according to Curtis Yarvin, he coaches J.D. Vance. Their equivalent in the UK, Dominic Cummings, all criticize large government, not because they believe in decentralized government and returning power to the people, but because they believe in taking the power that large government had and placing it into the hands of technocratic corporatism to rule over us in a AI-led tyranny and dictatorship by their own admission. As Time magazine reports here, on the 24th of March, 2025. Largely ignored by academic philosophers, the Dark Enlightenment movement and Yarvin have curried favor and influence with tech executives in recent years. This is from Time magazine. We're going to continue reading. A software engineer by training, Yarvin has become a kind of official philosopher for tech leaders like PayPal co-founder Peter Thiel and Mosaic founder Mark Andreessen. Not unlike the futurists, Yarvin advocates for replacing democracy with a kind of techno-feudal state, for the government to be run like a corporation, with the president as its CEO. This new system is elitist. Humans fit into dominance submission structures, Yarvin wrote in 2008. He has met with numerous members of the Trump administration, including J.D. Vance. Yarvin has said he is coaching Peter Thiel, according to Time magazine, and he even called him a friend in an interview with a Hoover institution. Before he entered the White House, Vance spoke favorably of Curtis Yarvin. There's this guy, Curtis Yarvin, who's written about some of these things, Vance said on a podcast 2021, adding, I think Trump is going to run again in 2024, and I think that what Trump should do, if I was giving him one piece of advice, fire every single mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state, replace them with our people. That's something that similarly Dominic Cummings in the UK was saying that Boris Johnson needed to do as well. Now, Steve Bannon has become aware of the Dark Enlightenment and of the agenda of people like Curtis Yarvin, and is quoted in the New York Times as saying as the following. And this is the New York Times journalist asking Steve Bannon. I asked him if he saw the same deep-level philosophical tension I did. A tension, he asked. I would almost argue it is an unbridgeable gap. That's the gap between followers of the Dark Enlightenment and believers in the Republic. Steve Bannon in the New York Times continues. He named a roster of major figures on the tech right whom he saw as enemies. Mr. Andreessen, we've just mentioned that name. Mark Zuckerberg. Remember, Peter Thiel was one of the first investors of Facebook. Steve Bannon continues. Jeff Bezos, the neo-monarchist writer, Mr. Yarvin, there he is, and Balaji Srinivasan, an investor and technologist who promotes the idea of network states, new countries run on blockchain. Mr. Bannon accused the tech barons of promoting techno-feudalism and transhumanism, bending human life into technologized and unnatural new forms. The thing is all tied together, he said. They have a very well thought through philosophy and a very well thought through set of ideas, and they're trying to implement that. And to me, everybody's afraid, everybody's scared because of their power. That's Steve Bannon talking about these Dark Enlightenment advocates, the tech barons, and their desire to bring in a technocracy run by AI, and their desire to replace large government with their technocratic corporatist feudalism. And remember, these are the people that have currently penetrated the cabinet of MAGA. They are J.D. Vance, who's backed by Peter Thiel, who's a follower of Curtis Yarvin and his Dark Enlightenment. And this now, when you understand all of this, it should make sense as to why J.D. Vance's response to Trump and the LA riots is to simply say, go on, my son, get in there, keep fighting, because he's seeking to escalate the problem. As you can see from this Times headline, Times of London headline from today, J.D. Vance, we will not be intimidated by lawlessness. The White House has remained defiant in the face of the growing national protests, which threaten to spiral into a mass movement not seen since the widespread demonstrations of 2020 sparked by the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. In a statement released on Monday night, the Vice President, J.D. Vance, said the administration will not be intimidated by lawlessness. President Trump will not back down. Of course, J.D. Vance wants President Trump not to back down. Their purpose is destabilization. Their purpose is to undermine Trump by sparking an overreaction, by goading Trump into overreacting so that he sends in troops so that this spreads like wildfire because people are fearing that America is about to turn into a military dictatorship. That is exactly what the technocratic corporatist techno-feudalists want, because, of course, once America is a military dictatorship, they get to run it using Palantir and their one eye of all-seeing surveillance. That's the plan, folks. And President Trump is aware, but of course can only operate within the confines and the parameters of reality. What becomes increasingly important is that MAGA becomes aware of this plan. Steve Bannon's aware of it. So that MAGA becomes aware of this plan so that there is a base stronger than the globalists and Palantir for Trump to listen to. And that base, of course, is the MAGA base. All of this was attempted against Nigel Farage too, as the Radical Dispatch reported. Again, there on your screens, 14th of August 2024, globalists seek to Jan 6 Nigel Farage over the UK riots. They tried to do the same thing because riots, when they happen, do not make for a popular leader. No leader who supports rioting or who is in charge during rioting comes out of it unscathed. And the polling, as published by the Times today, shows you what's happening to President Trump's support. You can see there that the favorable in red and the unfavorable above it. Trump's rating was favorable until recently. And then you can see right at the end of that plot there that it started to dip again and go down to 45%. It was rising to 50%, and something needed to be done to make Trump unpopular again. And of course, what was done was everything we've just explained. The external challenge against Trump's authority using the globalist left, and the internal challenge to Trump's authority using the globalist right. The purpose being to goad Trump into an overreaction by making him feel insecure in his position as president, and that overreaction would serve the globalists. And this is why, remember, we're speaking about Palantir. This is why Laura Loomer posted this. Time to deploy Palantir tech to Los Angeles to deal with the illegals. You know you'd love to see it. You're lying if you say you wouldn't. And of course, a poster there, Isaac's Army, Return of Cappy, responding, that was quick. Pay attention, fellow Americans. You are next. That's the plan, to goad Trump into an overreaction using Palantir. And of course, all of that comes back to Peter Thiel. And that same Palantir that Laura Loomer is saying should be used against these rioters in California is the same Palantir that on your screens now, as Bloomberg reports, was demonstrated to have been contracted with the IDF, Israel Defense Forces, to use AI to target Palestinians using drones. And of course, the targeting was done by AI, no human involved, military targeting of using drones by AI. That is the dark future that these guys want to see for you. And that there, again, from the Radical Dispatch is on your screens. There are major concerns around Peter Thiel's AI software Palantir using AI to target Palestinians for military strikes in Israel's war on Gaza. And go down to the bottom highlighted part. Peter Thiel is also a confirmed and known former associate of convicted pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. In fact, it was Epstein that initially gave Peter Thiel a huge millions in investment for the purposes of his projects, as the New York Times reports here on your screens. Headlined, Jeffrey Epstein invested with Peter Thiel and his estate is reaping millions. Subheading, Mr. Epstein, the late financier and sex offender, started by putting $40 million into Valar Ventures, a firm backed by Mr. Thiel. Today, that investment is worth about $170 million. So does it surprise you that Laura Loomer is asking for that same Palantir to be deployed against the rioters in California? That's what's going on. It's an attempt to goad Trump into an overreaction for the purposes of creating civil unrest and a riot so that the state can come in with ever more harsher powers. Problem, reaction, solution. That's how globalists work. That is the Hegelian dialect. They provoke the problem so that the solution that is demanded by the people is the very thing they wanted in the first place. And so problem, reaction, solution is something which we have been saying since at least the 2022 episode with Joe Rogan, episode 1780, is the format that's going to be used to usher in the globalist technocracy. The only thing that can stop it is us and our awareness. And to conclude today's stream, again, with a reminder from that episode 1780 on Joe Rogan, that these riots were already expected by us. Indeed. And on that note, we'll leave you until next week's Warrior Creed live stream. We thank you all for your patience getting through all the receipts today. We know it's been a dense hour and a half, a dense subject, but we hope that we're able to shed some light on precisely what's been going on in the US this week, and comparing it to what's already been going on in the UK. Attempts to stoke riots nationally. We've had our riots. Attempts to pin those riots on anti-globalist politicians so that they take the blame for the riots. Attempts to use the riots to increase state power because people demand that the government control the rioters. And of course, more power is then handed to the state. And then, of course, attempts to take over that state by criticizing it, attempts to take it from within by penetrating the cabinets. And then once having taken the power and the levers of the state, using AI to reform and restructure the entire state so that we end up with a technocratic, corporatist, AI-run tyranny. Now, the status quo isn't sustainable, and that is large, inefficient government. But nor is the trap that the technocrats are setting for us, that they are pretending to join us in critiquing the large, inefficient government so that we join them and follow them and then replace this large, inefficient government with their own large, efficient tyranny run by AI, at the top of which will sit Palantir, which also, by the way, has defense contracts with the United Kingdom. So to be aware of this is to understand, as we just mentioned there in that last Rogan clip, episode 1780, that the solution to large, inefficient globalist government is not technocratic tyranny, as Curtis Yarvin of the Dark Enlightenment would have us want, as Peter Thiel, follower of Curtis Yarvin, as Elon Musk friend of Peter Thiel, co-founder of PayPal, member of the PayPal Mafia, would have us want. As Dominic Cummings, former chief of staff to the Globist Prime Minister of the COVID mandate era in the UK, would have us want. The solution to large government is decentralization, not more centralization using AI. Efficiency is the word they're using to convince you to hand power to them. Decentralization is the word we should be using to demonstrate to them that we will not fall for their traps. Thank you for your patience. That's all for this week on the Warrior Creed live stream. All of the receipts will be published in tomorrow's written version of this stream in the Radical Dispatch via magicnoirs.substack.com. We encourage all of you to become premium subscribers on magicnoirs.substack.com, because without your support, we cannot continue this investigative work. We rely on you supporting this independent work so that we can carry on. Spread word, those of you who have become premium subscribers. Of course, your premium subscription gains access to the long-form Radical podcast and the Warrior Creed podcast, in addition to behind the paywall content, including the full written dispatch and not just the first half or first 2/3 of the dispatch. Until next week, you've been listening to the Radical Majid Nawaz.
You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength. Street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge. Quick service announcement brought to you in part by Warriors.